folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thank you for tuning in, as always. I'm recording this on a very frigid day in January. I think the last time I checked the temperature outside, it was 17 degrees. Luckily, I have the luxury today of not having to leave the house, unlike a lot of people. So, there was definitely some days, maybe 9 or 10 years ago, where I would have been up at 4 o'clock in the morning getting ready for work on a day like today to get screamed at. So that's a sign of progress, at least for me personally. On the show today, comedian and podcaster Alex Fossella. Alex is a guy who I know pretty well. I've known him for several years from the comedy community, and this was the first time we sat down and had a long chat. I had run into him, and we talked briefly at a show in Park Slope that Christian Polanco of the Cooligans hosts, which is every Wednesday at Two Boots Pizza in Park Slope. Great free comedy show, which you should check out if you're in the area. And I made plans with Alex to do this podcast, and we talked about a lot of... It was a really interesting conversation because we used the musical Rent, which is my favorite musical of all time still, even though most of my theater friends have started to view it differently as we've aged. It still holds a place in my heart. So we used the musical Rent as kind of a jumping off point to begin this conversation, which is sometimes a connection like that is all that it needs for me, at least, to get a really good conversation started. And this was a really great chat that I had with Alex. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you enjoy the show, please feel free to rate on iTunes or subscribe or put it in your friends list on Stitcher. That helps the show get better traction. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend. I'm extremely humbled that you would do that, so thank you very much. And before we get into the interview here, I want to make sure everyone knows that if you're in the New York City area, you can see me and Sam Z workshop our one-man shows on February 11th and 18th at Pete's Candy Store in Williamsburg, and also at Branded Saloon in Prospect Heights in Brooklyn. Those are free shows. They should be loose. They should be fun. And I'm looking forward to doing a show with Sam. So thank you for coming in advance. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Comic Will Carey. Thank you guys very much for listening. Let's go to my chat with Alex Fossella.
70s style miniseries by this eccentric author who is Will Ferrell in a bunch of fat makeup. And the first one's about just like a rich family and it's their excesses of their nonsense, and the second one is like a jazz film noir, and the second one isn't very good, but Haley Joel Osment is hysterical in it. I was like, like he doesn't work a whole lot anymore, but whenever I see him, I love him now.
Well,
he can deliver a joke.
Well, he's at that really cushy point where a few actors who I think were and actresses who were really big when we were younger are they're still working, but they have a cushion so that they can only work when they really like the thing.
Fred Savage is a director now.
Yeah.
He's been quietly killing it for the last 15 years, like doing sitcom stuff.
Yeah, he went the Ron Howard route.
Yeah.
He did the acting game, and now he's going to do the directing thing.
So he'll do a crappy Han Solo prequel, and we'll all be kind of sad, but know that that's what we were going to get anyway. So
yeah, well, it's sort of like the made for the made for TV or like made for movie adaptations of stage shows, or the live action remake of your favorite anime series, like
Death Note, looking at you.
Yeah, or like I love the anime Sword Art Online, even though a lot of people don't like it, but they're making a live action version for Netflix, and the early reports are saying that it's going to be dark. Now, there's plenty that they could improve on from the original novels, because the original novel was written like the author had to keep it under a certain page limit, so he had to kind of truncate certain things.
And
character development happened later on in like seasons 2 and 3. But I never trust that live action anime adaptations aren't going to suck.
Yeah, because anime is such a strange, specific thing, and it fully... One of the things I really love about anime is that it fully uses the capability of anything you can draw, you can make sense in that world. Because they get the universes that those guys come up with are so creative and insane.
Yeah.
And then they try to do a live action. Like Dragon Ball Z will never work as live action because it's centered mainly on glowing hair. And you can't do proper glowing hair and not look ridiculous in real life.
Oh no, I agree. Hair and eyes are like the big thing. Like anytime some clickbait writer thinks they have a genius thing about how anime girls don't look like women in real life. Even like there's some movie coming out in the next couple of years where they try to have the woman's eyes be like the same size, and it just looks odd.
Is it Alita Battle Angel?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that just looks odd, even though she's CG, and hair is the other big thing, because anytime you try to accurately replicate an anime character's hair in real life, most of the time it just looks like cosplay.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like a wardrobe department and a costume department and hair and makeup had anything to do with it.
It looks like I had a bathroom for 4 hours and a lot of hair gel, and I didn't want to be Deadpool again, so... Have we started, by the way? I can't tell.
Yeah, we started a couple of minutes ago.
I have opinions about anime.
Yeah, no, this is how I like to ease into it. I've done a couple I've done podcasts where the hosts do kind of like or do like stuff up top, and you're just kind of sitting there, but I just kind of ease into it.
Okay.
On a similar note, this will be the good way to start. Do you have any musical movie adaptations that you like?
Musical movie adaptations that I like.
Because, for example, I got into Chicago through the movie Chicago, and then I got into Rent through the movie, and then found out that the
show is much better. The movie has moments that are okay. Like the opening where they're doing the first track is kind of good, just because that's such a great song.
Yeah.
But when Roger's walking around Santa Fe singing about Mimi, I'm just like, oh god. In the theater, like, we were actually talking about this on my Broadway podcast because we did Rent this month, and a lot of things that work on stage, because you're doing a lot of the work in your imagination, if you actually see them in a movie, you're like, what is happening? And it just blows the illusion. So a lot of Rent only works when you're seeing Rent, the show, or listening to the album and imagining it. But when they made it into that movie, it does not translate. Some of it does, but a lot of it didn't.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I still do listen to the movie because I just like the production of the cast recording.
Oh yeah, the songs are good.
Because the producer did American Idiot, so the songs are good and they sound really good.
Was it Rob Cavallo?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he produced the movie version of Rent, the soundtrack, not the OBC. But so I agree with you. Like turning Santa Fe into this sort of like montage between Mark going through his life in New York and Roger trying to find himself in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Feels different compared to the stage version where you can do this cool the cool like they're on the stage but they keep missing each other kind of thing.
Because if you ask me, the Santa Fe arc should have been cut entirely, but I don't have any sway over how Rent is done. So are you going to watch it when they do it live on Fox this month?
Yes, I am.
Me too.
I will. And I've already heard some people like there's of course, every time anything gets cast, everyone always like, no, I would do this. I'm sure it will be good. I'm sure they could all hit the notes. It's not going to be when I first heard it when I was like my freshman year in college, and it really like impacted me. This is something I'd also like to ask. How did you get into Rent when you were younger, or did you discover it later?
No, so my musicals origin story is I always loved music, and I wanted to be a musician and a producer when I was a kid before I started comedy. But for some reason I had it in my head that I hated musicals, and when I was 30, I just listened to a few of them in a row, like Avenue Q and Book of Mormon, and then Hamilton, and I went, oh, I'm all about this. And so I started to burn through as many of them as I could and like make up for lost time. And then my friend Jay Schmidt is a comic who I love dearly, and he also has one foot in the Broadway world. He's got a theater degree. He's auditioned for some roles, and he's generally worked in and around theater. And so does his wife, who's not a comic, but she has another Broadway podcast called Broadwasted, where they get drunk with theater stars. And so I'm at a bar with them at like trivia, and she goes, "Oh, so I've been reading all your posts. So you were a theater kid, right?" I'm like, "No, I wasn't, and I deeply regret it." She's like, "Well, how do you know all that stuff?" I'm like, "'Cause I just realized I need to." I'm listening to musicals like I'm running out of time.
Right.
If I'm going to put this in Hamilton terms. And so she goes, "Why don't we do a podcast where we teach you about musicals every week?" And I was like, "Yay, time with my friends and a podcast."
Yeah.
Double-edged.
Oh, yeah, because you need to podcast in order to have...
we're in the age of content. Nothing should ever not be recorded.
Yeah, everything has to be content. Like, I couldn't just invite and have my fiance be cool with the like, oh, I'm just going to have, like some woman you've never met come over, and we're just going to talk in the back with the door closed for an hour.
Yeah.
Don't think anything.
But if you were
else about
Snapchatting it, that's fine.
Yeah, it's just content. It's just shareable. It's just shareable content.
She's reading your Twitter like, why aren't you making memes in there? When you don't meme, I don't trust.
Well, because the reason I was asking that is because I feel like most of my theater kid friends because that was my community for a long time, I feel like their relationship to Rent has changed as they've aged.
From what I understand, once you hit 30, you're like, Benny's got some points.
That's what a lot of my friends, but yeah, because I was thinking about that, and I'm like, well, they're also signing off on the like cheating on your wife with an HIV positive stripper and not telling her about it. And I don't, and not that I could ever, not that I understand the intricacies of HIV now or in the day, but even if you're using protection, I would still probably be upset if I was Benny's wife.
Me too.
You know?
Poor Allison is just always spoken of in she's like, oh, she's too rich and she's taking away all your ideals. She's probably fine. Benny's just not a nice person. Like,
yeah. Like he was probably crappy to live with in the loft, and then he's still crappy to deal with now.
I mean, the Rent takes place over a year. They're split up by the end.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, all right, that was over fast. I think, or he leaves the city. I thought they broke up.
He gets pulled out of the East Village location.
Yes.
So it's kind of indeterminate. I imagine if they aren't going to split up after the show's over, that he's going to be in the doghouse for probably several years. At which point, you would probably just like, you know what? I think I'll just leave.
So to answer your question, no, I did not listen to Rent until like a month ago.
Okay. So, and how old are you?
I'm 32.
Okay. So what is your reaction to it at 32, hearing it for the first time?
I think some of it is kind of, my feelings on just the songs of Rent is every great song has something really cringy and bad in it, and every terrible song has something amazing in it. Like, I hate Contact. It is both wildly unpleasant, disgusting, and a terrible narrative device. However, Angel's death solo is phenomenal.
Yes.
I love that part, but the rest of it I'm like, ew. And then what? You're all broken. What is going on?
Yeah, I didn't miss Contact when it was
nobody did.
When it was cut from the movie or the highlights version of the Broadway cast recording, because I feel like I don't if I'm just thinking about it on the spot right now, I don't know what it adds.
I mean, it's supposed to make them all break up to set the stage for the funeral fight, but
it does do that.
It doesn't. I wonder what Rent would have looked like had Jonathan Larson not died so fast, because he might have rewritten some things that would have worked much better. He also was notoriously like, no, fuck you, this is what I'm doing. Like the original version he had was 4.5 hours long, and like the plot was even muddier, and they were like, this needs some work. He's like, go fuck your mother, that's what needs work. And then they were very contentious, and they wore him down, and he admitted, okay, I'll fix it, whatever. But like, I wonder how much more of that he was willing to do at that stage, because it was still he died the first night of previews, I think.
Yeah, I think the night of the off-Broadway production, he he died. Is when he died. So,
something like that. Yeah.
So and then the story is that they were just going to do the table read of it, but then they just started like getting into it more and more.
By La Vie Boheme,
and then they switched to doing the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like the full stage production later on. Yeah, that story always amuses me because it's like creative people cannot handle any sort of genuine critique.
Yes.
Like it's immediately like oversensitive reaction, and I think oversensitive reaction and defensive, and then you go, okay, well, that's a pretty good point later.
Yeah, there's always that moment where, because the thing about writing and creating things is like it's a high. So when someone tells you that your high is wrong in some way, even though that's not really what they're saying, you're like, fuck you. I'm happy. And then later you're like, oh yeah, contact is wildly unpleasant. Damn. But in that moment, it feels like an attack.
Totally.
At your worst moments of ego.
Yeah. Have you listened or seen Dear Evan Hansen?
I've listened to the album. I love it.
I love it too. Like, I love musicals that have that sort of like rock or pop rock and roll kind of bass. I've seen it, and for a good portion of it, I was just worried for him.
For Evan?
Yeah, because I was like,
he's in a pickle.
Yeah, because I was just like, this is all gonna crash down, dude. And I hope you can pick up the pieces when it does. And he sort of does.
Yeah, I always point to Evan Hansen. One of the things that I think kept me from musicals as a kid was I was under the impression that it was all sing-songy Oklahoma, kind of like, oh, nothing really interesting happens in these. It's just sort of people singing their feelings, and it feels weird, and nothing interesting gets talked about. And then it dawned on me, musicals are darker than like half the movies in existence. The plots of musicals tend, when they go dark, they're like the plot of Evan Hansen, and that's always why I point to it, is like skin-crawlingly weird. You're like, he pretends, it's like Single White Female a little bit. It's like, he pretends that this dead kid was his friend because he's trying to absorb the family. Oh, Evan Hansen, you sick weirdo! What?
Yeah,
are you doing?
But you don't think about that because the music is so good.
Yes, you're just waving through a window.
Yeah. Oh, that song's great. That You Will Be Found song. It always makes me think of This Is Me, because they're written by the same people.
Okay.
From The Greatest Showman.
Oh, I've only seen about half of The Greatest Showman, and it was on a date, so it was shut off halfway through.
I see.
But I liked a lot of the music, especially the what's the opening track? That was great.
Yeah.
And Hugh Jackman is just amazing.
Oh yeah. Well, he's done Broadway too. So
yeah.
So you are so you're now at this point where you're trying to in your early 30s where you're trying to like go back and experience all this stuff that you feel like you've missed. Do you feel like you missed a lot of entertainment and pop culture when you were younger? Is this a result of that?
I feel like less so that I missed out on pop culture, although I did miss out on a lot of it because I just sort of watched the same things on a loop, and I didn't really like when kids were like, "Do you guys watch TRL?" I'm like, "What are you kids talking about?" I was watching like All in the Family at night, and like I was a big Nick at Night 12-year-old for some reason, and so I never felt quite connected on that way. So I'm actually kind of going through some of that now. Like I'm like, oh, I should listen to that Blink-182 album I heard people talking about, and I listen to it. I'm like, I prefer American Idiot.
Okay, I could talk to you about that because Blink-182 have been my favorite band since I was 13.
Okay,
what is the album in question?
It was Take Off Your Pants and Jacket.
Okay,
I'm more of a Green Day guy. I was back then too. That was one thing I was tapped into.
Yeah. So Green Day, I feel like Green Day in the 90s, they were like the Beatles to like the Rolling Stones, which I would compare to, like if Green Day were the Beatles, Rancid were the Rolling Stones for the early 90s, and then Blink was, I think they were like the pop punk like Beatles or boy band for the late 90s, which is when I came in because I was like, I think I was like 8 when Dookie came out, and I was not in the place where I was going to be I didn't have the cool enough record stores where I was going to get exposed to it. So, but talking about like Take Off Your Pants and Jacket specifically, I think there's like 13 songs on that, and I would say I still love maybe like 10 or 12 of them. But the best song on that album is a bonus track that is only on one specific version of that album. It's this acoustic song that Tom DeLonge wrote called "You Fucked Up My Life," and it has this great lyric for the 20 teenage 20 something that repeats towards the end where he goes, "I'm kicking out fiercely at the world around me." And I was like, that distills the essence of the genre.
Yeah, some punching, but kicking. Pretty vivid.
Have you ever seen Green Day live?
I saw them live once, and it was really good.
Where was that?
That was at the Barclays Center maybe last year, I think. I also met Billy Joe Armstrong, and he was very nice.
I'm glad to hear that.
He was starring in a movie.
I think I was at that show. Against Me were the openers.
Yes,
I was at that show.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a great show.
Yeah, the movie he did was called, at the time it was called Geezer, then it was renamed Ordinary World, where he played like a suburban dad who was having like a midlife crisis.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for this.
It's a very bad film with a really good cast, and he's like a charming like leading man, and then he came out and took questions, and I got a picture, and he was really nice. I kept him a little long because I was like, oh, when you guys covered Like a Rolling Stone, oh my God, that's my favorite song, and you nailed it. And he's like, oh yeah, we were really reaching in the studio that day. That's nice to hear. But so to go back to your original thing, I think part of the instinct to go after musicals particularly, I don't so much ever regret like, oh, I wasn't up with all the music that was happening back when I was in 8th grade. I do miss like, oh, I really wish I was a theater kid because now I kind of want to act and I can't just be like, hey, can I try out for the school play, because you're an adult and that's not like a thing anymore. And I that kind of haunts me that I never wasn't in Bye Bye Birdie when my high school class did it. I really wish I had done that. Bums me out.
I'm trying to think.
That's where podcasts come from.
Yeah, there's got to be a way for you to do. There's got to be a community center production in New York, because I feel like even like the independent New York theater scene, there's still those like career driven like sort of people that I'm trying to think of the true amateurs. The true amateur dramatics experience that you could have. There's got to be a community center somewhere.
My absolute, I don't think I can sing this well, but my dream one of my dream roles is Judas in Superstar. Because I just love that album so much, and he's my favorite character, and I love the whole dynamic of that album where it's like, let's take the Bible story and we'll make Jesus less heroic and everyone else more heroic, and you'll see that it wasn't quite so black and white the way the Bible tells it. I just think that's such a masterpiece and such a cool character.
Oh my God.
I just want to sing on a mountain going like, Jesus!
Yeah.
So good.
No,
that's a movie that's not great, but some of the cast is quite good. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy who played Judas in that movie is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, Jesus Christ Superstar. Just the fact that like theaters were getting firebombed over that show.
They were?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, no, that was super controversial when it first came out.
Interesting.
Anytime you do anything about Jesus, Christian groups get really
Well, Dogma,
upset.
Kevin Smith got like bricks through his window and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's intense. But what I found out later was apparently Superstar is now very big in very religious areas. They've kind of like co-opted it because it's about Jesus. But I'm like, do you guys realize that Jesus on that album is kind of an egomaniac with a death wish? Like, you not understand? And I go, all right, that's fine. Whatever makes you listen to the album.
Yeah, I imagine there's some nuances that maybe get glossed over conveniently.
Yeah.
So what were the things you were listening to on repeat when you were a kid? And how old are we when we're talking about
this? Let's say 7th or 8th grade.
Okay.
I watched a lot of old sitcoms on Nick at Night, like All in the Family and The Jeffersons, which I have not watched since, but little bits I've seen have held up incredibly well. Because, and actually, so I did a web series called My Racist Toaster. Which is exactly what it sounds like. It was a sitcom starring a guy and his toaster that was alive and racist and his Jewish girlfriend. And the pilot is the toaster finding out about the Jewish girlfriend, and it's this big kind of mess. And whenever I would write a line, so it was me and my friend Brandon, he directed it and edited it and shot it, and I wrote most of it, and we co-wrote like a little bit. And I also played the toaster, and we cast it. We got a guy who is a professional, like classically trained actor to be the guy, and then my friend Mallory, who's a really good actress and does improv, and she's really great. She played the female lead, and So whenever I would write a line where one of us, where Brandon would be like, "Can we get away with that?" I would play what I like to call the Archie Bunker defense, which is I would go like, "Okay, you're not supposed to think he's right. If anything, the fact that you know he's wrong makes him appear more buffoonish, but you also see why he's not 100% a monster, and the other guy's not 100% an angel either. It's a real relationship." So I tried to play this really ridiculous premise as nuanced and like realistically as possible, because that's where all the humor comes from, is a guy is arguing with his roommate who happens to be a living toaster that hates Jews. So we won an award at UCB. Best Inanimate Object, Channel 101 Awards.
Oh, spectacular.
So I watched a lot of those kind of sitcoms. I was big into Nickelodeon cartoons, which I'm going back through right now. I just bought Real Monsters on DVD.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Rocko's Modern Life, which gets better as you get older because you're like, there's a lot of dick jokes in this.
Yeah,
this is not for children.
Yeah, no, I feel like I missed. I feel like Rocko's Modern Life was going maybe a little bit over my head when it was on for me. What else was on? Doug, I always liked on Nickelodeon. Doug on Disney, not so much. But the original Doug and Ren and Stimpy. Ren and Stimpy.
That's a weird one too.
Yeah, that sort of, I think, was my first introduction to surrealism and absurdity.
I think it was a lot of our first introduction to it, because it's like, hey kids, do you know what existential dread is? Well, you're gonna. This Chihuahua is going to all of his teeth are gonna fall out slowly as he is like having a fever dream or something. It's like every episode.
Yeah, while some like weird creepy music plays. Like for all the kids that like missed Monty Python, I feel like Ren and Stimpy was there to fill that void. Like especially with all the gross close-ups.
Yeah,
like
those are upsetting.
Oh yeah, like the one scene where Ren and Stimpy are pretending to be babies, and like Ren this dad like just scrapes his face along his like unshaven chin.
Oh yeah.
And you can see like it goes really close, and you can see like the stubble like digging his flesh off of his face.
You know what Ren and Stimpy joke I think about like at least once a month for some reason is when they split Ren with a machine, or somehow they go, oh no, now he's his two sides, his evil side and his indifferent side.
I remember that.
I don't know why
one.
I think about that constantly.
I remember that one especially specifically.
Yeah.
And especially because I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons when I was a kid, but I was allowed to watch Ren and Stimpy, which...
What a strange parenting call.
Which I feel is worse. Like my mom just heard about The Simpsons like, oh, it's risque. And I had a joke about it where I would say, you know, don't watch this family struggle through real life situations. Watch this Puerto Rican Chihuahua domestically abuse his life partner.
Pretty much. Did you ever watch when they rebooted it on FX?
No.
I gave it one episode. I don't like to think about it. It was like, it was just all gay jokes, and like every little bit of subtext was blown out to full on like super text, but it was all unfunny and uncomfortable and bad and just double entendres, and it's just like the magic is long gone. I think it was canceled like right away.
Yeah, I seem to remember that. I like the animation style of Spunko, though. I don't know if they're still in business or not, but
I don't know.
Because I don't know if I'm becoming a snob now, but when I look at like the way character designs in American animation is versus character designs for anime, I just find you could find your most like basic, like lowest common denominator comedy anime, and the basic character designs are usually like light years beyond a show which I love, like Big Mouth on Netflix.
Yeah, it's a little more just sort of like, I don't want to say rushed, but it looks like someone could draw that. Like anyone could draw that if they tried. Whereas Japanese stuff tends to be more complicated, and also like has all these different like it won't just be some guy. Some guy will have like a tree growing out of his shoulder that has opinions or something. Like it's always this weird extra level.
Yeah.
That anime tends to give you, which I love.
Yeah, that I like that.
Yeah, I watched a lot of Dragon Ball Z as a kid, which I believe you're also.
Yeah, I watched a lot of Dragon Ball Z. Yeah. I watched Pokemon a bunch.
Me too.
And then I sort of went through a phase where I was out of it, and I'm been back in full bore for the last couple of years.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of anime fans have that, like, well, I used to watch it as a kid, but I watch more adult things right now, English Patient and whatever. And then one day you're like, I want to watch Dragon Ball right now. And then you just never stop.
Yeah.
There's a gap in the middle.
Yeah. Well, everyone goes through that thing of like, I feel like the collective, because it wasn't cool. Like all the stuff that's cool now.
Oh, you just jogged a memory for me.
Oh, what's that?
I was on the bus. We took a trip to New York for my school.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in East Hampton, Long Island.
Okay, so you're local. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and my dad always lived in the city, so I kind of jumped back and forth.
Sure.
So I had one leg over here and then one leg back there.
Totally.
But so we were taking the bus to New York, and my teachers all loved me because I was just really nice and wanted to please them, and like I liked talking to them because I was kind of that kid that was like, oh, these children are bothering me. Like I was like a little dad all the time.
You were an old soul. As they would say.
I like to say even now I'm an old man who hasn't gotten old yet.
Right.
I just haven't. I'm working toward it. But so we're on the bus, and my teachers liked me so much. They're like, I said, hey, I have a video. Can we put it in the movie? And they go, of course. And they put it on. And it was a Dragon Ball Z bootleg that my dad had bought me from like the Boo Saga in Japanese with subtitles. And there was just this wave of like, no, from the whole bus. They're like, no, get this off. And then someone very clearly yelled, Dragon Ball Z is for 5-year-olds. And my teacher came to me. She's like, I'm really sorry. I have to take this off. I was like, do what you have to do.
Oh my fucking God, that's sad.
And that just jogged another memory for me. Okay, this is going to be just repressed memory podcast.
No, that's good. That's what I go for.
It just tends to happen on my Broadway podcast too, because as we started to go through why I'm into theater now, old memories of theater started to come up, like, oh, I saw The Music Man when I was a kid and I loved it. I just blocked that out. Or I forget some more now. If I go through my podcast, I'll see. But there's always oh, you met Jack Klugman when you saw him at the Neil Simon and he was nice? Huh, why don't you remember that all the time? Like, I don't know. Just cover it up for some reason. So I was in 9th grade and I was really big into Nine Inch Nails. Specifically their first album. I loved a lot. Pretty Hate Machine.
With Head Like a Hole?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we had like a free day. It was like one of those like day before a 3-day weekend or vacation where the teacher's like, hey, I don't want to be a teacher today. Put on music and don't set anything on fire. And so I put in Pretty Hate Machine, and I think Head Like a Hole is a great song.
It is.
My class disagreed so vehemently they wouldn't even let it finish. They yanked it out of the CD player, and it was on this really like rusty table. And I was like, what are you gonna do with my CD? And somebody takes the CD and just slides it like air hockey style back at me, so it's like scraping the rust. I was like, no. They're like, get this shit out of my sight. And I was like, you don't get it, man. And they're driving me further into my gothness by doing that, obviously.
Of course.
I never went through a goth phase or a punk phase, but I was friends with all those kids because we liked all the same music.
Sure, yeah.
But I never I tried to dress punk for like one day, and I was like, this feels bad, but I still like the Ramones. So
yeah. That's a lot of work to be real punk.
It really was.
And that's why I liked Blink, because they were already dressing like the way I dress, with the long sleeve shirt over under the short sleeve shirt.
Perhaps with the thumb cut out of the sleeve, so you can wear that on the hand.
Yeah, like I was already in like jeans or khakis. Like I was always already dressing like that. I didn't like the extra effort of like trying to like with the leather and the studs.
Yeah.
Not that my parents were going to let me anyway, but
well, my parents tolerated it. My mother was very sweet and ironed on patches onto the back, totally punk rock. And my friends were very sweet. They gave me spikes to put on the jacket. They were very supportive of me trying to be like them, but then I was just like, I still like these bands and I like this jacket, but I think I'm going to take the spikes off and just wear it. And they're like, it's okay, sweetie, you're still punk rock to us.
Oh, that's a sweet story.
I was a really shy kid, and I was always kind of convinced that I didn't have friends, but I think people liked me, and I just was very self-isolating, if that makes sense.
Oh no, it makes sense to me too. Like I was very much like that. Like
it's weird. I don't know why I couldn't just be like, oh, you guys all want to talk to me, let's do that. I just always felt like, no, they secretly hate me.
Well, I had a hard time once I started getting like punk rock friends and theater friends. I still had hard times just in like basic conversation, because I grew up in a town of like under 800 people.
Okay.
If I wanted to go to a friend's house, it was a 20-minute drive, and I didn't have a driver's license. So just like forming basic sentences and that weren't revolved around, oh, I like this band, or oh, I like that band. Like,
can you believe that Roger said that to Mimi?
right. You
didn't laugh for a second. I was like, uh-oh.
I had to take a second to think.
Okay.
Well, going back to Rent, when I found that's the first. Another Day was the first song that ever made me just start crying by just hearing it, because just something about the melody just really.
I mean,
because I was that guy. I was the kid who sat alone with his guitar, and like girls were interested in me, but I was just either too shy or didn't know what to do, so I was scared, and I made up for it later.
Yeah.
But
I didn't end up dating until I was like out of college, because I just had I wasn't good at it when you're supposed to be just learning, because I was so isolated. And then by the time I got to college, I really still didn't know what I was doing, but now I was convinced I was like fucked in the head because I hadn't done any, so it just made it like way worse.
Right.
So I totally get where you're coming from, of the like, oh yeah, there's a little Roger in all of us. And a lot of my life has been kind of like, I don't do a thing forever and I feel weird about it, and then it clicks, and then I make up for lost time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of. I tend to study my way out of problems. Like I had, I never knew how to date, and I slowly but surely via OkCupid and stuff. Tinder saved my life, by the way. And I just crammed a bunch of like relationship advice podcasts, and now sometimes if I'm in a relationship and like I can see certain unhealthy things happening, and I'm like, oh, she's crossing my boundaries here. Maybe we can talk about it. Like, I was in a fight with someone I was dating once, and she said, you did this. And I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. And if I ever do it again, please tell me, because I never want to make you feel that way again. And she just lost it angry because she really wanted to have a fight. And I just like kung fu'd her with emotional health.
Right.
So I feel like I'm that with the theater thing. Like, I didn't like theater until I did. In a couple years, I'm gonna know more about theater than a lot of theater people, because that's just how my brain ends up working.
Right. Yeah. You kind of like find the thing.
Yeah.
And then you sort of like obsess over the thing and discover everything.
Big time.
Yeah. That's kind of how my brain works. Also, like I enjoy few things, but I know everything about them.
Yes.
So you're growing up on Long Island. I can't imagine Long Island's a super like creatively nurturing place. That's my stereotypical view of it.
Yeah, it's I was specifically in this town called Springs, which was a hamlet of East Hampton where Jackson Pollock was from. So I was just in the woods, and I didn't have any brothers or sisters. It was me and my mom and my dogs, and my dad lived in the city and came out on weekends. Right. So it was very much I watched a lot of TV because that was like creatively stimulating. And everyone was like, why do you watch so much TV? I'm like, because it's art, man. Like, I loved all that stuff. And then when I discovered music, I really wanted to make my own music, which I did to a degree. I tried to make one album, but I went like full crazy producer on it, where it was never enough and it was never finished. And I just sat alone, like tweaking this shit forever.
You had a Chinese democracy.
I really did. It was called White Noise. And then my goal was I wanted to be a musician, and I wanted to pay for my musician life by being a music producer.
Okay.
Because I love album production, like, to this day, especially like, even if I don't love the genre of music, if you get a producer that I think is cool with that artist, like anything Danger Mouse is on, I'm in, because he's so good. He adds an unmistakable touch to everything he is involved in.
Who's your favorite producer for like rock or punk rock? You say you were a Green Day fan. So.
Yes, I'm going to say Rob Cavallo. I don't know too many. What's his name? I want to say Robert Robertson, but I don't know if that's his actual name. He produced the first Korn album and an album with The Cure that was pretty good. I think I got his name wrong, but he was great.
I think I know the guy you're talking about. I think he also did one of Vanilla Ice's like rap metal albums.
That sounds like something he would do, which I probably will Spotify on the way home, now that I'm curious. And what's his name? the guy that Steve Albini that produced In Utero.
Yep.
Because Nirvana was my favorite band until I discovered Bob Dylan, and then he became my everything.
Uh-huh.
So
That's an interesting yin and yang there.
Yeah,
I can see it though. I mean, at its core, those are all those are all pop songs. I think Nirvana is like all pop songs.
It's like Beatles with distortion on.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Like I've been getting into this band called A Day to Remember. I don't know if you've ever listened to them. They are they're really big now. They are sort of a blend of pop punk and metalcore.
Okay.
So they have low tuned guitars and they're screaming and breakdowns, but the lyrics are all very like it's all very accessible melodies, and it's like intro, verse, chorus, big chorus, breakdown. So it's all still very accessible. It's like the same formula across multiple like genres, because I think humans are hardwired for those kinds of things. Let me also ask you this: what? So you were really into production. That's interesting. So, is there a record that you think that? Is there an album for you that you think is just this is a masterpiece as far as the songs and the production is concerned?
This is gonna sound weird, but I totally stand by this. Outkast's Stankonia is their production was always so creative because they had this team called Organized Noise that also worked with TLC, and Outkast are really solid songwriters anyway. Yeah, but like there's so many layers of the beats would all sound like instruments that aren't real. There was always these cool effects on them, and that just like really, really did it for me. And then also they're great rappers. So, I liked them a lot, and I still like them. And I've always enjoyed rap, but I'd never gotten full on into it. But like the ones I tend to get into usually have like really, really cool backing tracks. Yeah,
that's I feel like rap is a big producer's medium. Like there's like
because you're essentially a co-writer.
Yes. Yeah, because
you're writing the chord progression a lot of the times.
Yeah, like I don't know too many rappers of the ones I've talked to, I don't know too many rappers that go in to a recording studio and have all the music charted out, or like can play the song like on guitar or something like that, or on bass. So it's a team effort. I feel like a lot of rap music is.
And then to bring it back around to theater, my newest example of perfect production is Hamilton, because that's Questlove, and he nailed it.
Yes, yeah. Questlove is so knowledgeable on just everything. I've also been to one of his DJ nights at Brooklyn Bowl, and it's
How was that?
It was fun.
Cool.
It was fun. Like everything just kind of blended in seamlessly, and I don't think I knew half the songs that were played, but I was like, oh, this is good. I like that beat, or I like it's all the hooks made sense. Okay, so you're gonna be in bands, and then you obsess. And were you in a band, or was this a solo album?
There was a solo album. I had a band, and it didn't work out. And my dad had bought us all this recording equipment, and because the band broke up, I was like, well, I still got to use it. So I wanted to teach myself how to make an album with all that stuff. And the stuff I wrote, it wasn't like, I love rock songs, and I love the 1-4-5 pat. Like I'm a big fan of structure for structure's sake, because structure to me is fun. Like in music or even in comedy, it's like how I write a joke and stuff.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to. But I wrote this kind of like weird. It had a melody, but it was never like. It was always these really weird interval. I hate that I'm going to say this. It was sort of like jazz in the way. It wasn't jazz as a genre, but it was like the notes were just intervals that I felt like doing.
Okay.
And I tried to do a lot of the stuff that Outkast had done, where like I tried to put effects on everything, so everything sounded weird and spacey. And I think a lot of it, I don't think were very good songs, but I think that like if I gave those building blocks of what I had in Pro Tools to a musician, like a rapper or whatever, they could turn it into something that would still have what I had gone for, that would still sound pretty good. So I think I had the building blocks of some kind of talent, but I think I really needed someone to be there to go like, no, this is fine, because otherwise, and it's the same thing a lot of times with, that's why I like, I think comedy stuck for me, is because there's instant, you drive yourself crazy, but there's an instant feedback of some kind. where you're not just in
Right.
a room going, is this good? I don't know. And then it's 4 a.m. You're like, I don't know who I am anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. By that point, you sort of like, okay, let's take a break for tomorrow. So you still have any of those skills? Like if I hired you to produce a record for me, could you do it? You think?
I bet I wouldn't know how to bring out the proper like levels, because mixing was always what drove me crazy. But I bet if you were like, hey, here's the song, put like a cool drum beat and like accentuate what I've recorded, I could do something that would actually be kind of cool. I think I still just have that talent rattling around.
Okay, I'm going to keep that in mind.
Okay, if you want to try this, I'm willing to give it a try.
Some goals.
I might be terrible at it, but I think I could try.
I got some I got some New Year's resolutions. I'm trying to get some stuff released this year, so I'm going to keep that in mind.
Will do.
So, and then did you go to school for this stuff? What did you go to college for?
I studied philosophy in school, but I started as a music major as part of the life plan.
Okay.
But then
where did you go to school?
I went to school at Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And oddly enough, so that's a Jesuit school, so it's like Catholic with science, sort of. And I was very, very hardcore Catholic until the summer before I had already signed on to go to that school, and I was like, shit. But then it was just like a normal college, and like there was church if you wanted it, but other than that, it was just like liberal arts.
Gotcha. So you're a hardcore Catholic, and then you just turned it off like a light switch.
Kind of. It's still as I think a lot of Catholics tend to experience, that it never fully leaves you. Like you still have residual, like dealing with guilt and stuff. And I tend to make every decision I make into this struggle against good and evil, and I don't realize how silly it is till I tell someone else. Like I'm talking to someone, I'm like, and I don't know if it's the right thing to do. They're like, you said this was about whether or not you should have ice cream 2 days in a row. I'm like, yes, because if I get fat, then blah, blah, blah. But they're like, calm down, dude. Run an extra hour on your treadmill. It's fine. I'm like, oh, yeah.
It sounds like forgiving yourself might be something you're trying to work on.
Yes. I've actually so the last couple years I've tended to have streaks of workaholism in my life with music, and then especially with comedy, because any process that doesn't have an exact end, I will just throw every bit of work into trying to get to the end that I've imagined.
Right.
And this year I'm like, okay, I think a lot of that is unhealthy. I like that I have a drive, but let's maybe put the drive into like being happy and stuff, and being interesting and being healthy. So I'm taking all of that, diving into books and stuff that I was trying to get comedy done with, and I'm still doing it, but I'm doing it for reasons other than I want everyone to like me and be famous, because that's an unhealthy drive.
Yeah.
And it's made everything better so far. I have little bits where I relapse and I feel desperate again, but for the most part, I'm like, okay, this is going to be the year that I do things for my own health and for my own liking of me, and not for some imagined, like, well, if I get passed at this club, I'll feel amazing, and then it's just this endless carrot on a stick.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do something similar, because I feel like that sort of desperate trying to figure out how to get past at clubs ultimately does not get you past at clubs.
Yeah, because then you have the stink of desperation on all of your jokes, and then everyone's like, ew, desperation, and then it doesn't. Like when I was like, I'm just going to take a week and just like read whatever I want to read and like maybe watch some movies and whatever. I did a show like at the end of the week and just not doing any comedy until then, and it was amazing. I did a really good job because comedy felt novel again. And I had just like thought about other stuff and lived my life.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing for me to separate, like devoting some time to just that as opposed to like working toward the goal,
Right. Well, you have that sort of, and I talk about this with a lot of people, that sort of, you sort of hit that point where when you're starting, it is important to get lots of reps in and to feel comfortable being on stage and how to hold a mic and saying words to people. Like there's a certain point of that, but then there's also a part of diminishing returns where you got to start working harder. You got to start working smarter and harder isn't necessarily
very much
like you got to start like picking out the better shows and then like writing out the jokes maybe a different way, and then knowing where you can get the good feedback so that when you listen to the set you're like, okay, I can productively improve on what I did, and then and
put more work into observing. Like I devote an hour every day to just walking around with no headphones and just looking at people, and just even if I don't get any jokes out of it, like I feel more grounded as I go about my day because I'm like, all right, I've lived life for a perfect hour, and I've seen people interact in nice ways, so things aren't so bad. I've seen one asshole that maybe I can turn into a joke later. What it just, and it's almost kind of sad when I'm like, I have to devote time to being a person, but like that's how my brain works. I have to schedule time.
Well, in New York, because the pace is so hectic, I feel like you have to, and that's good also because what really bugs me is people who get booked a lot on like in our on like our level, the bar shows and like the cool shows level. It really bugs me when they start viewing it as their open mic and they start throwing premises out like, oh, do you think that could be anything? That really irks me. Like just when I'm back there, I'm like, could you fucking try, please?
That's the thing is that I'm always willing to watch someone be bad if they're new or if they're having a bad day. It doesn't bother me at all. I never feel like, oh, they're wasting my time, blah, 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 blah. But when someone says I'm not trying or they clearly aren't, I get really mad because I'm like, we're all here because we want to do this. Have the decency to want to do this or don't be here. So when someone's like, oh, I'm just wasting, like I saw a guy once who was like, 5 minutes left. I don't know what I want to talk about. I don't even know I'm here. And I'm like, why are you here then? What are you doing?
There was this guy, and I'm not going to mention names. There was this guy who he would go up at mics and then most of the time be quiet the entire set. And I remember being at one mic where the host just was like, no. Get the fuck out. And you know, there's a lot to unpack there, but ultimately I like to see like a little effort. I don't even mind if you've got a whole bunch of new stuff you want to try, but like if you I know there's a certain people work by like saying something on stage and seeing if it comes to them in the moment, but the onset of like I'm just gonna throw some stuff out there really irks me. I need effort when it comes to my comedy, because
you can tell when someone is struggling with effort and you go, okay, well, they could pull this off at the end, or if they don't, it's honorable to try. Like and one thing I've learned is that like the prevailing wisdom right now among our comedy people is like, well, did you get up 47 times today? Oh no, well then you don't want it bad enough. Like it's this pissing contest. And I told my shrink that because I was worrying all the time, like I don't get on stage enough. And they're like, how many times do you get on stage? I'm like, oh, like 7 to 10. They're like, that's a lot. I'm like, but everyone does like 30. They're like, I think those people are desperate and you might be better off mentally than they are. I was like, oh yeah, maybe that is a desperate pissing contest. Well, that's counterproductive ultimately.
Yeah, well, the performative hustle is becoming the act of like you're working, the look of that you work harder is without results is
there's
something.
A diminishing returns, as you were saying.
Yeah. So now, when did stand-up comedy catch for you? Because we're talking about all this stuff and you're going to do music, but then you say that the kind of the way your mind works is a good way for is good for your comedy. So I'm curious how stand-up comedy grabs you initially. Were you a fan of stand-up when you were younger?
So one thing I'll say just on the how my brain works, and then I'll get into that. What I was referencing before is that like I really like musical structure, which is why if someone's just doing some kind of thing that has no direction, unless I can see some kind of fun pattern in it, I'm kind of out. Which is why like I write jokes that are set up punchline, and a lot of people look at that, and not specifically to me, but like they look on that, they're like, well, you're just doing jokes. And I'm like, yeah, it's comedy. Jokes are fun.
Jokes are fun.
Why do you get into comedy if you hate jokes? I get that everyone's got a different definition of a joke, totally. But when someone had like, I've talked to one of my friends loves, like, for lack of a better term, alt comedy, and he's like, I don't trust someone when I feel like they're telling me a joke. I'm like, then why are you in a comedy show?
Yeah,
you want to be told a nondescript story where you might laugh at the end? That doesn't sound fun. But so I got into so when I was a kid, stand-up was always a thing I enjoyed. A lot of it went over my head, but I always just thought it was really cool, and especially because it was like bonding time between me and my father, where we would always laugh and we're like, hey, Andy Candler rules. And my mom was like, they're not funny. And we're like, yes, they are. High five. And we're like we would play comedy CDs when we were like driving around. And he was very supportive of my music aspirations, and he was supportive of any kind of art form I wanted to learn more about. And he loves comedy too. My dad's a huge Bobcat Goldthwait fan.
Huh.
And very nicely
Open for Nirvana.
Yes.
Full circle.
Yes. And Bobcat Goldthwait did my philosophy podcast, and my dad goes, "Can you tell him that your father's a big fan?" And I told the host to tell him that. I don't know if he actually did, but I told my dad he did, and my dad was like so happy. I was so happy I could do that for him. And I've met Bobcat. He's very sweet too. And
awesome. I'd love to meet him. He seems like a cool guy.
He's a down to earth normal person.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And but so it was always just this thing that was fun, and I grew to like it more and more. But I kind of had what we think of as like the bad attitude toward comedy, like it's entertainment, it's not art, you know, where I was like, oh, well, they're just saying stuff, and like I'm having a good time, but like, you know, music is art, painting is art, this is just something else. And then there were a few guys that I had always watched that I liked but hadn't had the urge to follow really, and one of them was Patton Oswalt. I had seen him on like a Premium Blend or something, or he would turn up in little spots, and I liked him a lot, but I hadn't given him that much thought. And then Dave Attell was another one, and Mitch Hedberg, and kind of that class.
Oh yeah, those guys are all great. I just saw Dave Attell a few weeks ago. He's still got it. He's still funny.
He's convinced he's a terrible comedian. He's a genius.
He is, but
he hates himself.
I think that's what makes him so funny.
It might. That's also what makes him barely put out any material, because supposedly he keeps recording hours and going, "That sucks," and never releasing it. So we have like 2 or 3 albums of his where he's got mountains of material that we'll just never hear.
Yeah,
he's an interesting fellow.
He certainly is.
Yeah. And
so like Patton, Mitch,
Louis, but we do not speak about him anymore. So Patton puts out this special called "No Reason to Complain," and something about that special just flips a switch in my brain. And I went, "Oh, this is a guy who's like me. He thinks like me. He's cool. I know he's not cool in the classic sense. I think he's awesome.
Yeah.
And he's really, really making me laugh right now in this way where I can see he writes jokes the way a songwriter writes songs, to be a little pretentious about it. And
no, it makes sense. Jokes have a formula.
Totally, yeah.
They definitely do.
And his formula very much clicked with me. And so I go, okay, let me see what on Amazon, maybe he's got a DVD of the special or something. And I look up, I see he's got a CD, and I go, okay, I'll buy that. And then I listen to it, and he's swearing on it, and it's like looser, and I was like, oh shit, comedy's like a little bit dangerous. Okay. And I started getting deeper and deeper into it, and I started to follow comics the way I used to follow bands. And that's when it really clicked. This is an art form, and you can watch, you can chart a guy's life and the way it's reflected in his stand-up albums, the way you can see like, oh, this is when Kurt Cobain started experimenting with speed and, stuff like that. And I thought that was so cool. And then I just started the way I do with musicals now. I just started to try to get all of it as much as I can and learn. And then I had this moment. I had signed up to be a music major at school. I barely was passing music theory, so I was like, music, it's math. Terrible at math.
Right.
And so I just wanted to jam, man. And so I start getting more and more into comedy, and I go, okay, I need to change majors. The only class I'm good at is philosophy, or really good at, that I could justify putting a big stake in, is philosophy.
Right.
And I thought, you know what? I'm starting to really, really be interested in stand-up more than music. I think I might give it a try. And then so I started to give it a try little bit by little bit. And then I went, you know what? I think I might just shift my entire life plan to this. And I did. For better or for worse, I decided to take all that energy that I put into music and be a comedian. And I kind of never looked back after that. And, there's...
And what year was that?
So I started when I was in my first year of college, which was 2006, but I could only do it infrequently. So I count my beginning of my career. I maybe put together like a year of experience over my doing it on vacations, and doing it in Worcester, which is a nightmare I wish on no man.
Right.
And so
the more like working class Boston kind of.
Yeah, but
town.
like with a weird axe to grind and like yelling at you and stuff. Like it's like aggressive. Because I did comedy there a couple times. It was fine. But when someone really wanted to ruin your mood, like they were really good at it. So.
Right.
And although the comics were really sweet, we all did 10 minutes and they all had the same material. But then I would go to New York and practice and then come back and they were like, "What have you been doing there? That's so much. Oh my God!" They were like, I had a little following amongst these like Worcester comics, which was they would just not time me. They're like, "We want to hear everything," and I was like, "All right." And I wasn't good because I was year one, but
right.
So officially I start in 2009, and I'm kind of embarrassed of that number because I feel like I should, for the amount of years and effort I put into this, I wish I were a lot better at it. But I tend to go through those periods of like, this isn't working, and then I go, oh, I got to do this, and then I make some improvements, and then burn out, and then keep switching.
Right.
Yeah, like I discovered a couple years ago, I'm like, I'm a good joke writer. I don't think I'm a good performer. Maybe I should read acting books to figure out how to perform. And it just changed. I learned all these techniques, and I'm like, oh, I have to feel feelings, and that's the funny part of the joke. I don't just say words and hope for the best. So I tend to get to these really desperate burnout, depression points, and then go, okay, what's something I can do to make this better? And then I dive really deep into that, and it helps a lot, and then kind of goes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then hopefully I'll get somewhere after that.
Yeah. It's
I just said a lot of words at you. So.
No, it's all good because it's like, again, there's a certain jazz-like quality to it because you're just sort of like going around the scales and be like, oh, okay, that's good. I can. Yeah. And then I want to bend this note a certain level.
And then the structure, you're like, oh, there's certain structures. I can take this joke here, or I can take it here. The same way you could take this chord from this chord to here, or this chord down here, and it will still have the same effect, but it'll be 2 different executions.
Exactly. Like there's so many different ways you can play G, C, and D. Playing it open chords, or if you're playing power chords, if you're playing like 7th ska kind of chords.
Yeah.
There's same ingredients, but we're all making different soup.
Yeah.
Kind of.
It's like every Green Day song is like da na 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 in different iterations, but they're always great because they're saying something new every time with that familiar structure, and that's how it's fun.
Yeah. I agree completely. Are you still doing the philosophy podcast?
Yes. So Mike Kaplan was the guest that just came out. We did Oscar Wilde with him. We are entering our 7th season soon, and I believe the 7th season opener is going to be Kevin Nealon. We did George Orwell with him.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, so that show came about because I had my degree, and I started comedy, and also one of the reasons why I picked philosophy was because I'm like, well, if I get really good at thinking, that'll make my comedy better. So I didn't tell my parents that part about changing, but that was my internal logic. And so I met this guy, Danny Lobell, who had a
I know
show.
him.
Yeah, he had a show called Comical Radio that was almost about to end, but before it did, he had seen me at a mic, and he goes, hey, I like you. Can you write us some bits to do on air to give us a little something new to do? And I said, sure. I write them. The show ends before they use them, but he now likes me. So he goes, he moves to L.A., and he goes, I'm producing Ralphie May and Lana Turner, his wife's podcast. They want sketches to be bumps between interviews. Can you send me a packet of like 10 sketches that are just like a minute long? And so I stay up till like 6 a.m. doing that, and I'm like, these are terrible, and I send them, and he loves them. And so now they used a couple, and then that show folded because they got divorced, and then Ralphie has since left us.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
I always thought he was very funny.
I like him a lot. Yeah. I don't always agree with his opinions. That a lot of them have not aged well, but just him as a performer was really good.
Yeah, I agree. There's tons of comedians that I think are hilarious that I don't see eye
very
with.
much. And I'm good with that. As long as someone makes me laugh, I'm totally okay with hearing something and I'm like, you're not a good person. But you have explained it vividly enough that like old Eddie Murphy, I'm like, you're an awful man, but please tell me everything. Like
yeah, exactly.
And so I start.
So you are doing sketches for them.
Yeah, doing sketches for them. Their show ends. And then Danny goes, I wanted to start another podcast and I wanted to learn philosophy. He found out I had a philosophy degree because he put out a blast on Facebook and says, who's a philosophy expert? One of my friends, Angel Castillo, goes, hey, your boy Fossella has a degree in it. He calls me and he goes, all right, I want to do a show where I learn about philosophy with other comics, and I'm going to try to get really big guests. Because he's friends with Mark Maron and Bill Burr, so they did our show really early. And he goes, can you do that like a lesson plan? I went, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. And I kind of perfected the science of doing it, where I say why I picked that philosopher, do a synopsis, do a paragraph, and I do quotes. And sometimes I pick a philosopher who I know someone will really agree with, so they'll come alive. And sometimes if I know someone is funnier when they're angry, I'll pick something they will hate. Like Bill Burr, I did Adam Smith, who was a capitalist philosopher, because he hates banks, so I just wanted to watch him go, yeah, God fucking damn it, like, because I know that's when he's at his funniest. So
he hates the banks.
So it was, and that was a really good episode, and that was maybe our 6th episode, I want to say. And Danny has this superpower where he can just go up to famous people and go, do my podcast, and a lot of times they say yes. So we've gotten some very conspicuous no's, but we got a lot of yeses. Yeah, so that's still going strong. I'm not allowed to repeat philosophers, so I've been delving into like authors and political figures. Like we did Hamilton and Jefferson back to back this year. We did David Koechner. We did Hamilton because he was a poli-sci major.
Do you see your? Oh my gosh, I sort of wonder if you're diving into political figures. Are you going to have to get into the philosophy of dictators at some point?
That's an interesting call, because my rule is I look at an author, like even a novelist or a historian or a philosopher, or whatever, or a politician, as long as what they did, they wrote it and it was a very distinct worldview. Like Hamilton had a worldview. People are terrible. The only thing that keeps them in line is enough government control that we will control what is best for them so they don't all eat each other. And Jefferson he was a big reader of the Enlightenment thinker. So he was like, human nature is beautiful and government can mess it up, and that's why they butted heads so often. So I wouldn't just write dictators tend to not have a philosophy except for give me all the money and child brides. So that's not as conducive. But if I found one that someone would say he's a dictator, but I go, well, he has a worldview and that's relevant to talk about, I would totally do it.
Look into Taiwan specifically, because they have a very interesting history. I was there back in October, and there not only did we tour like the mausoleum which was essentially where I don't know if it's where he lived, but it's basically a museum of his life, and you can see like
who's this?
I'll have to message it to you later, but he has this huge grand square, which is the site of all of this history in Taiwan. And the day my fiance and I happened to be walking through, the current president of Taiwan was there giving a speech with the president of St. Lucia, like one of those are great nations. So
that's good.
I feel like that Taiwan specifically, because they're like independent, but they're not really what they want to be. I feel like there's some interesting history to delve in there.
Yeah.
To there.
I just did Che Guevara for a guy who was just a friend of Danny's that was I don't know if he's a comic or he was just like a podcaster or was funny, that they used to do comical radio together. And I picked him A, because the dude loves history, and B, because he's a loner, so I picked a socialist specifically. And so I was like, all right, that's... And then sometimes I love to, like, whenever I pick a philosopher and then I find out there's like a movie about them, I just kind of send out the episode and then like enjoy the fruits of my labor. Like when we did Hamilton, I then went home and my mom had gotten me the Hamilton graphic novel, and I read that, and I sent a copy to Danny, and I'm just like, yes, I'm good at what I do.
Excellent. And what's the name of the Broadway podcast?
It's called Broadway Baby.
Broadway Baby. And you're learning about musicals on the podcast?
Yes. So when Kimberly figured out that I loved musicals, she's like, let's do a podcast where we educate you about it. We'll do one album per week, and we'll do a word of the week, and we'll talk to you about, any terms that you want to learn. We'll go into depth about it. And we've been doing that since 4th of July. So our year-end episode is going to be July 4. We're going to do 1776.
Nice. That's a good one.
Yeah, I love that one. Our first episode was Hair, which I adore. I love Hair. And I'm also wearing Hamilton socks. I forgot.
Nice.
and I have one more weird writing project to say about Hamilton before we next, because I'm really excited about it.
Of course.
And so we just do one album a month. We split Rent into two episodes because it's so long.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's just them, because it's a fun dynamic, because Jay and Kimberly still love theater, but they're a little jaded about it, and I love theater, and I'm relentlessly childlike enthusiastic about it.
Nice.
So sometimes they will think a show is just sort of fine because they know all the tropes better than I do. Like
Right.
one of my favorite shows is Waitress, that Sarah Bareilles wrote, and they're like, they saw it and I saw it, and they're like, I said, what do you guys think? They're like, well, it's okay, but, you know, it has some sort of tired tropes, like there needs to be nerd characters that fall in love as a B story, and she kind of writes syllables that came a little bit weird not coming out of her own mouth because she was writing for someone else. What do you think? I'm like, I love it. They were singing and dancing. It was it's like I gave a child's book report on Waitress, like, they were singing and dancing. They made my heart sing. The end. And so they're like, we have to manage how we talk around you, because we're just like, we don't want to be so jaded that we feel like we're telling you you're wrong because you're our beautiful Broadway baby and you're just happy to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important not to lose that. This, I think, might be a good way to close it out, because I spend a lot of time on YouTube. Like, the number of YouTube channels that are just dedicated to the, like, what's wrong with this current popular movie that just came out, or this is how they should have done it, like this unending like frustrated film student
there must be
criticism.
Something wrong with this that we can exploit.
Yeah, the like kind of frustrated film nerd criticism on the internet really is tiresome to me, because it's like, well, you haven't made anything.
You haven't made anything, and also it's a movie. They all inherently have flaws. Did you notice it at the time is the test.
Yeah, and I almost never do, because I only ever start nitpicking stuff because I love it so much. Like this poster for this anime right here. Okay. I've told you about this on Facebook. You were looking for anime one time.
Okay.
I'm like a not a televangelist, but I'm like a missionary for this movie, because.
And what's this called again?
This movie's called Your Name. I think it is damn near close to being perfect. It's my favorite animated film, and I'm only now starting to notice other nuances on it, because I've paid so much attention and have thought about it.
Have you seen it like a million times?
I not a million times, because it affects me so deeply. I have to be in the right frame of mind to.
Gotta go. Okay, we're gonna do it.
Yeah, but I definitely, when I started, like, even before I saw it, like, I saw trailers and stuff, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I can't wait to see this. There's got to be. I want these people on the internet that are just like frustrated that they haven't been asked to direct anything.
Yeah.
To just remember that first time, again, like what you're experiencing on this podcast now. Just remember the first time you really got excited for movies and you started just watching a ton of them, and all of them. It didn't matter what the genre was. You were like, you heard about it and you wanted to see it. You know,
the very active putting in another one was a new thing. Like that's whenever I get bummed out about comedy, I go back to the same handful of albums. Feeling Kind of Patton, Skanks for the Memories, which is a tell. Mitch Altogether, Greg Giraldo's first album, I listened to a lot this week. Whenever I'm just like, what am I even fucking doing? I'm like, go back to when you just couldn't wait to do the thing and you weren't worrying about the steps of it and competition and progress. You were just like, I need to tell jokes into a microphone because that sounds like the most fun thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like especially if you're a filmmaker or a musician, it's really easy to get jaded, because if you do so much, it just becomes rote.
Yeah.
So if you have to take almost active steps to remind yourself why you should be happy to just be doing this at all, and that you figured out to have some semblance of talent in it, because otherwise it just won't be fun. Yeah.
And it's important that it stays fun, because otherwise it's a job.
Definitely.
It's a job, and why are you doing it?
Yeah, it should be the most fun job, not just, I gotta get going to that thing. You should be like, I gotta get going to that thing.
Yeah. That's if there's a philosophy to take from the show, it's live your life like you are excitedly going to the thing.
Pretty much.
Dude, this has been great.
Thank you for. I was worried that I was just like, well, movies, huh? And then we kind of got into my origin story.
Yeah, no, I had a plan for how I was
Okay,
going to
good.
get that out of you. So
Okay.
this has been great, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I talk about the Hamilton writing project?
Yes,
That's
of course.
the thing I want to plug.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What is that?
Okay, so my friend Eitan Levine wrote a Hamilton porn parody called Hamilto, which is already genius. And I post about Hamilton nonstop, if you will, on Facebook. And he goes, hey, weirdest job opportunity you've ever gotten, but I think you're the man for the job. I just pitched to the Museum of Erotic Literature in Las Vegas to cross-promote with my film. I don't think he called it a film. Like, my Hamilton, the film, my movie, to do an exhibit of like racy quotes from Hamilton's actual letters. Do you want to compile those? And I was like, I am not throwing away my shot. So that's dropping, I think, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
I think so. I'm gonna retweet the shit out of it.
Okay, you send me a link so that
Yes.
I can plug it on this.
Will do.
Excellent. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. That's the show for the week. You can listen to Alex's podcast, Broadway Baby, on iTunes and Stitcher, wherever you get podcasts. And I'll have links for his Hamilton porn parody in the description. So if you want to check those out, please feel free to do so. I'm on Twitter at ComicWillCare if you want to give me a follow. And again, February 11th and 18th, I will be at Pete's Candy Store with Sam Z. And on February 15th, we will be at Branded Saloon, all in Brooklyn. So thank you guys in advance. I hope to see some awesome disasters there. Maybe in 2019, that's what I'll start calling the listeners of this show, the awesome disasters. Sounds like a good garage rock band name. So we'll see if that catches on. Thank you guys again for listening, and I'll see you next week between awesome and disaster. Take care, everybody.